Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 14th Degree Dialogue podcast, where strategy meets direction. Today, we have an amazing guest. This guest is Jay Woldar, and Jay is a veteran of financial services with 20 years of U.S. money center banking experiences, specializing treasury cash management, and over 15 years of expertise serving major corporate and banks through Fiserv and ISG. As the lead advisor for the America's 14 degree Azimuth Advisory, it brings sharp insight into banking and the financial services. Today, we're going to dive into how US banks are embracing offshoring in India and the strategies for unlocking value from global capability centers. So, welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Roberto. Very excited to be here and enjoy the topic we're going to be discussing today. So, look forward to diving into the material and talking about GCCs and how banking and financial services have developed through utilization of the offshore vehicles in India.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic, in fact. And I have to say, this podcast is, in fact, and also offered by the 14th Degree Advisory Association. Oh, sorry, come cazzo? Why I confused? Such a long name. I'm gonna cut this part off. The 14th Degree Advisory, Azimuth Advisory. There we go. Okay, so and this podcast is brought to you by the 14 Degree Azimuth Advisory, that you can get all the best services when it comes to set up a GCC in India, and we have expertise from everywhere. My name is Roberto Capodieci. I'm going to be the host of this podcast. I'm also one of the advisors of the group. All right, so let's start with understanding a little bit the evolution of shoring strategies that has been taking place in the United States. So my question is, how have U.S. banks' strategy for leveraging the Global Capability Center in India evolved over the past 20 years? And what key milestone or shift have driven this transformation?
So the story itself goes back probably to let's say, the mid to late 1990s, where the larger banks, the large money center banks, the JP Morgans, the Citibank, Bank of New York, Mellon, those banks started establishing, captive India capability centers, really as a way of being able to utilize and take advantage of the cost of labor arbitrage between the United States and India. There was a wealth of talent, a lot of opportunity as far as the talent base, but also generally the technology that was there available to support those business lines. And these organizations were looking at ways that we're going to be able to, one, establish these centers, two, be able to migrate and utilize those centers to be able to support their banking operations on a global level. And then, as well as that, to be able to really be able to engage with these particular groups to be able to drive their cost and expense base down, but yet still be able to provide and deliver excellent service to their client base across the globe. So as the 1990s then evolved into the 2000s and some economic things have changed, one, they were able to understand, what were the real skill sets that were possessed in India, as far as, they originally started with your standard FP&A, account reconciliation, more back office support type of work. And then as time's gone on, they really understood and developed the type of talent base to be able to then broaden that offering to additional type services, their development services. There was a time where contact center and customer support and customer services were supported through India. Really, the technology has evolved. Two, their understanding as to the talent and capability of the groups in India has developed. And then three, the global marketplace has really accepted and adopted to what was available in India, and really kind of enjoyed leveraging that to be able to drive that expense management side of the business.
It's interesting because in the early 90s, I was in the United States, in fact, and I remember every IT center localized had somehow people from India, because they seems to be the best skilled to manage things. And these people were really out of place in terms of you see that they will feel better at home. So it makes total sense. Then the shift has been the one to bring there the operations while keeping the relationships of having the skilled people working for these institutions. And I do believe that also the advancement of technology sort of enables opportunities. For example, when the phone lines were really limited to local systems. It was hard to have a call center on the other side of the planet. And as soon as voice over IP or satellite connectivity has enabled the possibility to relocate really in other parts. In fact, the technological impact of GCC has a value, right? My question would be, how can emerging technology accelerate the piece of GCC adoption and enhance, the strategic value? So in both sides, like what is enabled by technology and what the technology probably has a better, skill set abroad, and which innovation should financial institutions focus on to maximize their benefit in this competitive landscape?
So there are a couple different things you kind of touched on there, and you actually started kind of, let's say, introducing the topic. So as technology and as the communication skills and voice over IP capabilities really became adopted and apparent across the globe, one, it became much more cost effective with which to be able to interact globally in that manner. One, the timeline to be able to get information moved back and forth between the two centers, being the center in the US where they were producing the actual work, and two in India where they were working on the materials, doing some of the development work, working through some of the, account reconciliation, those type of skills, those type of things, just the acceleration of the process and then the cost reduction for the technology. We're not even talking about the labor arbitrage. We're really just talking about the technology costs. It really became it became quintessential to the ability with which to be able to adopt and embrace being able to do the work overseas. Then coupled with that, you came in the kind of the development of the technology. So there was really the adoption of automation, the creation of automated bots as a way of being able to continue to help service the type of function and work that was being done both in India as well as in the US. And then what they were able to do is to be able to identify, where were those skill sets most applicable to the specific work that was being done in the banking and financial services sector, to be able to, one, get the value from that staff in India, but two, be able to then deliver that value back to the US, not just in the way of being able to make expense savings, but really accelerated timeline for turnaround on type of functions. There was the realization that there was some, excellent programming and development skills that were located in India, and therefore the adoption of those type of skills in application to some of the needs of both project work as well as ongoing software support was very apparent and became almost a center of excellence within India for those groups, even to the point where as over time it got to be competitive for that talent base within India. And so there was this internal pulling and pushing that was going on within the Indian marketplace. For one, it was driving up some of the expense. Let's say that the talent was like, hey, wait a second, I need to make some more money here. So that was a good thing, because it then really kind of developed into the idea of we need to continue to factor in and be able to, let's say, evolve the talent base across a broader set of the Indian educational systems to be able to continue to develop and deliver that type of skill set. And obviously, it's not just to the US marketplace, the European banks and then the global banks in Asia also took to that as well. So, India has really become, one of the key places where this type of global capability center not only developed and fostered, but really has been able to demonstrate the value to the marketplace on many, many different levels. Then you also talked about technology. So you talk about the development of the automation software and things like that. But then on top of that, you also had the layering in of the artificial intelligence, the kind of the explosion and adoption of cloud-based services to be able to support the hosting of applications. All of these things have led to utilizing the global economy to be able to support localized markets. And the US has certainly been one that's been at the forefront of that level of adoption. And then, let's say, the language skills that go back and forth between India and the U.S. with the basis of the use of English has certainly also supported that type of adoption and embracing the marketplace in India.
Practically, this phenomenon has changed and shaped the way of business both in a country that outsource works out and in the country that receive it is outsourcing, right? So in terms of cost savings on one side, availability of skilled people for certain kind of work and projects, so talent availability, and also the fact that probably these places, these GCCs are capable to bring in the innovation or practically more attentive of uh, emerging technology, emerging solution once they know their clients need or their own employer need if they are directly involved. And it's beautiful, these things that you mentioned, the fact that once this becomes a relevant type of service offered in a country, he automatically shape also down to the education, universities, and the job market dynamics. In the next future, how you see this growing, changing, and shaping a new modality of implementation for GCCs abroad?
Well, so we talked about some of the early on skills that were being developed within the Indian GCCs. And then as time has gone on, you really got into more of that software development, project development work, not just the back office FP&A style stuff, but there have also been the need to be able to utilize different technologies to be able to accelerate account opening, know your customer KYC, anti-money laundering, AML type of things. And so as the economy, specifically in 2000, and then as we've gone into, the teens as well as now the 2020s, the need to, one, be able to understand who's moving money, the amounts of money that are moving around globally now is just absolutely staggering. And so, therefore, the regulatory requirements that are applied to be able to utilize and then be able to adopt compliance to these regulations, both obviously within the US, where my focus is, but also on a global basis in the European marketplace as well as in Asia. And I know there's been an awful lot, within Eastern Europe as well. There's been that kind of fundamental need to ensure that you're providing excellent service, but also ensuring that movement of money is being compliant with those regulatory requirements that are being established and then enhanced across the cross-border movement. So when you talk about I mentioned AI, but I also mentioned cloud. So now the ability with which to be able to host software globally and then be able to service that software both from a localized marketplace, but also from a global marketplace through an Indian GCC has been, very much a fundamental, let's say, game changer in the ability of the GCCs to continue to evolve to support the evolving global economy. And because of that, the let's say the cost arbitrage of doing the work in India continues to pay benefits to the US. I know the North American market with Canada and Mexico also very strong in being able to understand and support, utilizing the Indian marketplace. But, as I said, the European marketplace as well has been very strong in being able to do that.
Yeah, on this front, there was in fact a set of thought that I had in terms of regulation on the other side, right? So Europe has, unfortunately, a heavy weight to drugs for every business. There are the compliance with regulations, sometimes absurd one that come out before even the technology is out, and limit the possibility, for example, data need to be saved in the same country where they are operated, blah, blah, cannot be manipulated in a remote places. So this will limit the possibilities. I was thinking the United States now with this idea of bringing all the job back inside the United States put that is a risk, which is the regulatory landscape when it comes for a company to implement a GCC abroad in order to have to delocalize one part of their business, one office, or which are the best way. Sometimes has to be the same company incorporating in the remote country to run the GCC. Other time has to be a contract. what are the solution and what are the methods that are mostly used in order to operate the GCC abroad?
Well, you touched on a very interesting topic. So, data protection has become an extremely important as well as hugely regulated issue, both obviously throughout Europe, but also in the US. So, it's not only about the ability of the individual to be able to protect their data, it's the responsibility of those financial institutions, specifically banks and merchant service processors, that have the information about the individual that are then utilizing offshore processing to be able to support those operations. There are very specific regulatory requirements for data protection in that respect. So the technology has enabled the ability to be able to encrypt data as it's being transitioned between different locations, but also to be able to fragment that data so that the individuals that are accessing and then utilizing that data are only seeing those individual elements that are pertinent to their particular applications. Thereby, they're able to do that work, support the business, and still be conforming and compliant with those regulatory requirements as established in the US, in Europe, in the European Union, across that particular, global marketplace. The fact is, and the ability to be able to do that continues to, let's say, feed the need to be able to find those type of high level offshore locations. And while India is certainly the one we're focusing on and talking about, there are others globally that do support these type of efforts. I will say that in my experience and having worked with a number of these organizations in these global locations, India certainly continues to be at the forefront, both in adoption and utilization of these technologies, but in delivering excellent results to the companies they support.
Yeah, I do believe that a company that is planning to work with GCC will just look very well on the country law enforcement or regulations, ethics, past things. So I'm sure that when it comes to choices of this type, they're very well vetted, and also the experience done previously by others will talk about opportunities. In the average, the shift from 100% location or inside the country to the implementation of GCC outsourced part of the business. What is the process? How much does it take in terms of time? If there is a moment where things are slowed down or cost more, or is a smooth transition? How is the practical methodology for somebody to implement this sort of the localization of
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's not a small endeavor, but I guess the economics of it have owned itself out. So the investment is absolutely worthwhile. I would think that a GCC could probably be from inception to adoption and being able to be fully utilized. You're probably talking about anywhere from a month, 6 weeks to maybe 2 to 3 months, depending on both the sophistication and technology that would be required to support that. Fortunately, India does have that infrastructure to be able to do that. And there are many centers, locations across the country that have both the infrastructure and the technology to be able to support both establishment as well as the talent to be able to support, staffing for these particular locations. One of the other things that are also important is, and you touched on this, quickly, with the changing, let's say, leadership in the US and some of the economic impacts that some of that leadership is trying to impress or import upon the global economy, it does change the perception of, is it in everyone's best interest to be able to do certain type of functions and adopt certain type of things? From as an American watching the administration kind of try to roll out this type of, let's say, this methodology. One, I think part of it is somewhat the scare tactic element of it about we want to make sure that we're doing what's best for the domestic and US global, US market in trying to insource those type of functions. But it's also about really trying to understand the importance of the US economy and how it plays in the global economy. And I don't think that there's going to be this wholesale migration of everything from a global economy back to the US. One, I don't think it's very feasible to think that that's going to happen. And two, I don't think it's economically worthwhile to all of a sudden, because of the rattling of a saber, so to speak, to start disengaging with decades long functionality that's established and working extremely well. So, yeah, I mean, I really don't see that particular issue happening. there is the idea of onshoring certain functions, but I don't think it's going to be as impactful as some people are concerned about.
And furthermore, if they're doing things that are useful for the United States to dominate, it would not make sense to create an issue in how business work actually would be made as more smooth as possible. And in fact, for a company that want to analyze, want to study, want to see or understand what it will take for them to set up a GCC over in India, that's what 14 Degree Azimuth Advisory offers as a service. And as you see, you have people from everywhere in the world with a very specific specialization, like Jay, like myself, like several others. The analysis, consultations, and all the process can be guaranteed to be smooth and stay on the cheaper and shorter term rather than the
Well,
longer
sure.
one.
Talking about, what 14th Degree can provide. I mean, one, we pull from a global staff of both the knowledge base as well as in market servicing. I mean, some of my colleagues obviously are located in India, but we have colleagues that are located in the UK and in Germany, across the European market landscape. There are one or two others within the US marketplace that are also supporting this effort. So, yeah, I mean, one, we have well talented people that have done this for a period of time. Two, people that understand that it's not one shape fits all. So we understand the importance of being able to, one, evaluate and be keen to the specific interests of the companies that we're working with. Two, being able to do that kind of consulting and advisory work to be able to understand and direct those companies we're working with as to what is the best way to be able to embrace and adopt this type of technology and this type of capability. Three, really trying to, let's say, manage the economics so that it's, you're not spending money foolishly, and you're really directing those resources most appropriately to be able to get the value for the company that's actually, embracing and then evolving these services in India.
Exactly. Fantastic. And thank you, Jay, for your time. And thank you for everybody for listening. Stay tuned because we're going to be back with more people and more interesting insight in this world. Until next time. Ciao.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Enjoyed our conversation today.